Welcome to a Modern Nonprofit podcast, powered by the Charity CFO, your compass for creative solutions in running your nonprofit. I'm Tosha Anderson, your host and guide through this nonprofit maze. From fundraising to volunteer management, we've got your back. Join us each episode for fresh, game-changing strategies that can make a real impact. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of a Modern Nonprofit podcast. And today I bring along another new friend of mine, Dana Snyder. Dana, you are the host of Missions to Movements and the creator of the monthly Giving Mastermind. Before we dive into the content, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for spending some time with our listenership and audience to talk all things kind of digital marketing and, more importantly, how that helps fundraising. So first and foremost, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Hello.
Well, friends that are listening, today we're going to talk about one of the things I love talking about most. Well, two things, I guess. Dana, we're going to talk about money and fundraising and how we can leverage marketing to do that. And Dana, this is an area that I've talked with some of my clients about, although I am no marketing expert, but I'm a hobbyist, as I've said earlier. How to leverage marketing and specifically digital marketing or even social media in a way that really can kind of transform your fundraising. And Dan, I'm sure you get this all the time, but I've talked with so many nonprofits that treat social media as kind of a passive, we must do thing, or marketing as more for like awareness. You know, it's something we have to do in this digital age, but it's not intentional. Do you find that I'm off base, or is this true for you and the clients you work with?
I think it depends. I see organizations more so now post COVID. COVID really made people have to lean into digital marketing and rely on it a lot more. I think it depends on the leadership. Maybe you see this also from my financial side. And I love that you actually brought that up, because when I talk to my fractional CFO, we have a budget line for marketing, right? It's something that is ingrained. It is known to be there. There's a percentage that we allocate to it annually. It's something that we plan for. So every organization should have that budget, whether you're, especially on the startup phase, it's normally even a heavier marketing spend because you do need to do that awareness play, but it also falls into credibility and trust and retention. So some of the leadership that I see doing a really great job at marketing often come from the for-profit space. So they've had for-profit experience. They understand how valuable marketing is. And therefore, they are going like brand first. They are investing in the quality of their website. They're investing in the quality of any external sponsorship materials, their social content, everything, design, logos, what that looks like, because they understand. And I've actually had this same experience with me where people say, wow, like, I'm impressed when I go onto your website. It's so clean. It's so fresh. It's so bold. And that reflects on me as a brand. If you're not investing that way and you go to a website and maybe it hasn't been updated in a long time, it's hard to go through. The images take a long time to load. You're not really on social. Then there's this perception of, oh, I don't know if this is a good organization that I want to be associated with. And it drops that credibility. So yeah, I think I see that. I think it depends on, again, the leadership and the value they place on that. And I think something that I've always said is your website and your digital marketing is essentially your storefront. If somebody was going to drive up to a mall and see your establishment, what would it look like? And your website is the way that people do that online.
You talked about brand, and what I think about when you were describing this is brand identity. And it's really interesting. You know, I've had the opportunity to work with nonprofits, actually work for nonprofits, not just in a consulting way, but as an employee, and serve on boards and have really intimate conversations with those that are charged with leadership, or at least the vision of the organization. And it's interesting to me how they view themselves and talk about themselves, whether you know, use some of the words like bold, or some of the other words that I've heard, innovative, cutting edge, you know, doing something unique or different than maybe what other folks are trying to do. It's fascinating to me, though, that sometimes we don't take a hard look at that digital storefront and ask ourselves, is that matching how we talk about ourselves internally, what we wholeheartedly believe we are, and how we want to, more importantly, portray ourselves to the outside world. And I say all the time, you can be the absolute best service out there, but if nobody knows about you, then what does that matter? And we're talking about fundraising and kind of marketing through that lens today, but you could say the same thing from a programmatic standpoint, people being able to find you or
Absolutely.
find that you are a good provider for the services that they're seeking. So there's multiple different reasons
And
for why
sometimes
this storefront.
we add confusion and complexities where not necessary. So I have a great example. I just spoke at Newman University about a month ago, and it was to a group of probably like 70-ish nonprofits, and they had a big giving day coming up, their first giving day as a community. And so part of what I discussed was making sure that their messaging about what they do is really clear. So listener, this could be you. This is going to be a tool. So write this down. It's called Hemingway app. It's totally free. You can go to it online, hemingwayapp.com, and it essentially associates a grade to your copy. So for example, a lot of the times with our mission statements, we like to get really wordy. And I went on a couple of the organization's websites and I did a little audit. I took, like, on the very header, the first thing that people see, a lot of times we have these complicated sentences or paragraphs explaining what we do. And my question is always, what does that mean? What does that actually do? And so you put that paragraph chunk into Hemingway app, and the average marketing language shouldn't be any more than, like, honestly, 4th to 6th grade reading level. And I put in these sentences or these paragraphs, and they were like 12th grade and up a lot of times.
Very
And
academic.
Yes. And so we really need to look at, is this clear? And so it was interesting. I went through and some of them had big paragraphs and I changed it to one sentence. And then I asked the organization, because they're in the room, right? Like, does this speak to what you do? And they laughed and they're like, yes, that's what we do. That's it. It's that simple. And so when we think about, I think, marketing and language, sometimes we like to get super, like, wordy, and we're like, oh, this is good and it's juicy. And it's like, no, like, let's just get super simple and clean and clear. And I think one of the best examples, organizations talk about them all the time, Charity Water. They want to give the world clean drinking water. Point blank. That's it. Like, what is your super simple? Another way to describe this is, listener, if you have been on any Zoom meetings or anywhere where you've had to introduce yourself and what you do, I have found it is very difficult for most organizations to do that in less than 30 seconds. It gets really wordy really fast. And I always have to pause somebody in my intros and say, give it to me in 10 seconds. What do you do?
Right.
Even with me in our bio, like at the very beginning, I quickly changed it to what it is that I actually do. Right. So anyways, just to go to show, like, to keep it clean, keep it simple, if you're going to go through some sort of like rebrand or you're trying to work on it.
It's so interesting. How you hit the nail on the head for me, because I talk about this a lot, and I've mentioned this so many times on this podcast. When we talk about like messaging and marketing, it's fascinating to me. Sometimes I will talk to a nonprofit looking for accounting services, and I go to their website. I've talked to thousands of nonprofits at this point after almost 20 years, right? And sometimes I even have a hard time understanding what they do, so much so that I have to go to the audit or the 990. The 990 requires like 3 sentences that you must populate. Sometimes I have to go all the way to the 990. Just tell me what this program does, because I don't understand. It's so incredibly wordy, which I really been spending some time being intentional about that in the work that I do, like for my own business when it comes to marketing. There's this concept that, people buy, or in the nonprofit world, they give not necessarily to the best or the greatest cause, right? It's the cause that they understand the fastest and like the easiest. And this is any sort of like buying philosophy. You have to understand it very quickly and very easily. So if you mentioned the word copy, and I agree with you, it's very academic a lot of times, because typically it's it's very smart people writing this copy. So,
Yes. Yes. And
and they tend to use
one
the
of,
words that they use in normal language, not necessarily what's
yes.
appealing. Yeah.
And on your website, so if you're going to do a self audit of your organization, listener, 90%, 80-90% of people are not going to scroll past your header.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great
Mm-hmm.
tool called Microsoft Clarity. Again, it's totally free, and you can literally see this. They look at where the scrolls are happening, the heat maps. And so when I have a monthly giving mastermind program, and I build monthly giving programs from scratch. And through that process, we create these landing page websites for them.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
header is the most important part, where
Right.
there's one line has the value proposition of what
Mm-hmm.
they are helping to make happen. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
donate button, a donate widget right at the front. So you
Exactly.
don't have to scroll to give, and you don't have to scroll to know where your funds are going. Like point blank. Like if anything, that should be it.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Let's dive into raising money and campaigns. When we're talking campaigns, I know there's lots of different ways that you can run campaigns. You can do paid ads, you can do through email list and those sort of things. Tell us what your favorite campaign is that you're doing for, your clients right now.
So my big focus twofold is on monthly giving programs. I strongly
Mm-hmm.
believe in recurring first. There is
Mm-hmm.
so much data around that retention rates are 89% for monthly giving. The average donor, Neon One just came out with a brilliant recurring giving report that the average recurring donor stays around for 7 years
Wow.
versus a one-time donor has a retention rate of 40%, and it's so hard to
Mm-hmm.
get them back. So when it comes to monthly giving and marketing campaigns surrounding that, I believe that there's always an awareness phase of where are these funds going to be going? What's the impact that you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
able to create? Tell the story, the founding story, the project story based upon what it is that you want to raise the funds for.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the donation of what are they going to be able to do? Like putting the donor as like the hero as to what they're going to be able to make happen. And then I think
Mm-hmm.
there's the follow-up in a campaign that's
Mm-hmm.
massively underrated, and that helps us with the retention. I always talk to my mastermind group as to what's your 12-year and beyond plan. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times with monthly giving, there is the first 12 months, right? In month one, we're going to do this. We're going to have our monthly newsletters. Maybe at 6 months,
Yeah.
we're going to do this. At a year, we're going to say thank you. But then there's this question of, oh, but wait, they stick around for 7 years
Mm-hmm.
potentially, right? What are we
Mm-hmm.
doing after that? Because that's huge. So thinking about the campaign is not just on the front end. I also consider it very much on the back end of the thank yous, and the retention planning as well. On on the front end, you mentioned email list building.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is crucial. There's so much
Okay.
power in building a passionate, engaged email list.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, social is not where your conversion of a donation is going to happen. It's mostly on
Mm.
that email, right, or your website.
Okay.
So I like to build Facebook ad campaigns. I have an ads
Mm.
challenge that's called Grow Your List in September, March and September every year. And the goal is to grow your email list with 100 new passionate supporters based on
Okay.
offering a values aligned, like free download exchange. And I
Mm-hmm.
just had my recent group go through this spring, and they saw 200 plus emails in 7 days.
Wow.
So we worked on what would be a free download that is really helpful to your audience. A
Mm-hmm.
great example is there's a nonprofit that's focused on helping teachers,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically the 6th to 12th grade. And so she did a literacy guide with like 5 tips. And
Mm-hmm.
they not only had over 200 people download that freebie, but she said, I actually got emails back from people. She had like an
Mm-hmm.
email drip sequence afterwards, after they downloaded it.
Sure.
I was introducing them to the organization. Um, they got emails back saying, oh my gosh, we've been looking for this. This is so helpful, specifically for our age group. And that's
Mm-hmm.
powerful. That's when you know you've hit the right target audience. So I think
Right.
you're always building on the acquisition side, and then you're working really hard to make sure that there's a good retention plan in place. So two sides to the campaign.
I love that you talk about acquisition because I think that for so many nonprofits, their email list is just this kind of stagnant, kind of out there. They reuse the same list over and over again. Maybe they add people if they went to an event.
It's a
Maybe
very
just
stagnant growth. Yeah.
very slow, and probably you're having more people unsubscribe than subscribe. And I think this is an area that most nonprofits are not intentional enough about, getting new subscribers and really kind of analyzing who are maybe the people that are on your email list, and for what purpose are they on your email list? Is it kind of a
Right.
nurturing fundraising newsletter, or some sort of campaign? Is it programmatic in nature, as you had mentioned, if you're some sort of association or you're targeting like professionals that happen to work in your space versus, a family and children's social service agency that just needs to know about events you're happening? There's all of these different ways that you can leverage email marketing, but I don't think this has been an intentional focus, I think, for many nonprofits. So acquisition, I think, is key, right? You have to keep adding more and more people and being very thoughtful about that. And how are you going to do that? So if you could, Dana, talk about some of I really look at it like two options: paid and unpaid ways to add
Mhm.
to your list. You had mentioned Facebook ads, but let's talk about maybe some unpaid. Like, what have you advised your clients? Hey, at a minimum, you need to be knocking these free opportunities for people to opt in to your email list.
Yes. So if you're an organization that's on Instagram, I highly recommend this tool called ManyChat.
Many
ManyChat,
chat.
all one word. And there is a free option, I believe, and then there's a paid monthly that's very nominal. I want to say it's like $15.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're on Instagram, you are most likely posting reels, or should be, because that's one of the main pieces of
Mm-hmm.
content on that channel to post.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
if you haven't, it doesn't have to be a reel, but when you write, comment a word. So, for example, I have a reel and it's talking about, this is very topical for a podcast. I have a list of 30 podcasts for nonprofits that they should pitch themselves on to share their story and share their monthly giving program.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that list of 30 podcasts is a freebie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get the word out and I give that freebie in exchange for an email. So I could run a Facebook ad for that. The other thing I do is I launched a reel or carousel post on Instagram, and I'll say comment podcast or comment the word pitch below, and I will send
Mm,
you a link to the freebie in your DM. All of this is
mm,
automated. ManyChat
right.
is like a if this, then that tool. So it's like you
Sure.
put in the word if pitch, then you write the automatic comment that will populate. It's like, go check your DMs. I've sent it to you. That's automated.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll get an automated DM message that's like, hey, thank you so much for your interest. Here's your link to download the 30 podcasts to pitch for your nonprofit. And they click that
Mm-hmm.
link and it loads a form and then they can download it. So that's a very organic way to do it. And
Mm,
you could have a bunch of different reels or Insta or carousel posts
mm-hmm.
that you are like popping in here or there with, you could
Mm-hmm.
change up the word pitch or podcast or whatever you want those core words to be.
Right.
That's a really great free way to utilize your social accounts to be able to
Mm.
gain emails.
That's interesting. I love the automation, the free tools. Is there a way with that tool to segment if you're focusing on, say, programmatic participants or volunteers versus donors, or will it help you, or does it just add to the full email list? Does it help you segment the email list,
So
or do you know?
I have in my case, I use Flowdesk as my email tool. And
Mm.
so I have a segment that is specifically for that freebie download.
Ah,
So that is, I know that they came to me because they wanted that freebie, because then I have a workflow that drips out once
gotcha.
they do that.
Gotcha.
There are further ways dependent upon your email tool with tagging. So this is something you should
Mm,
definitely have implemented if you
right.
don't, where this is kind of like step 2 is, let's say that first email I send out is just the freebie. It's the download. Maybe I have a video associated with it. The second email, I want to introduce myself a bit more. And let's say I'm going to say, by the way, here's 3 additional resources for how to pitch the podcast, how to make sure you get a yes.
Mm-hmm.
Or, by the way, here's an upcoming event we have if you're interested on this. Or and
Mm,
based upon the different links that they click, you could then tag
mm-hmm.
them and have them even be further segmented.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So I'm always curious about this. You've mentioned a couple, software solutions, and I've used similar types of apps, and they try to make them as user friendly as possible. But a question for you: when you have an organization you're working with that is starting to launch all of these things, or if a listener is listening to this episode, it's like, all these sound great, but I'm already buried at work. Like, I don't have the capacity to do it. It's not my skill set. I guess my question is, what needs to be true for nonprofits to effectively do these things that you're talking about? Building the list or running the email, automation, setting up social media and kind of engaging in that way, creating the content. I'm talking from a staffing perspective, from a financial investment, or, we talked about budgeting earlier. Like, what needs to be true from a resources
Yeah.
to effectively do these things?
I mean, I think first, curiosity. Second, you have to be willing and able to try new things and take some risks. I am a solopreneur plus half. I call myself
Mm-hmm.
1.5. I have a brand partnerships manager that's part-time and it's me. So I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times people see what I put out and they're like, oh, you must have a big team. And I'm like, no, I do not.
Actually, no. Yeah.
Actually, no. I've also had a VA, so I highly recommend virtual assistants. There's a great organization called
Mm.
morethan.giving.co, and they specialize in virtual assistants just for nonprofits. And you can
Mm.
pick the number of hours that you want a month, and they match them with the skill sets. So this is a big thing that I recommend. That was a great question. Is if you absolutely despise social media or marketing, that's going to
Mm-hmm.
show. That's going to show in your
Mm-hmm.
content. If you don't like it, if you don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
doing it, and B, it's a waste of your time. Like your time is best spent on where you are exceptional at. If that's networking and fundraising and doing all those things, awesome. Go find
Mm-hmm.
someone else to do all the other things on that list of yours that are just like draining you. Because if you're draining
Mm-hmm.
yourself of those
Right.
things, your good energy is not going to be able to come back for the things that you're excelling at. So I
Exactly.
highly recommend hiring out a VA, even if it's a few hours a month, just to help take those things off of your plate. But you have to be willing to invest a little bit, and then I promise it's
Mm-hmm.
going to come back.
Mm-hmm. And you probably work with organizations of all different sizes. So, what size is usually the point? Now, I would say from the beginning, if you're a startup, it's even more important for you to be doing some of these activities. But what size organizations do you typically see really start taking this stuff seriously, or start investing in like the full-time person, or at least a designated part-time person that's managing like marketing and social media and creating content in that way, or at least building the database, making sure that their CRM system is capturing all of this information, which is a whole
Yeah.
other conversation,
Yeah.
probably, that we'll dive into in a minute. But what size organization do you typically see starts making this sort of investment? In other words, how do I know if I'm behind or on track, or I really need to be looking at this in the very near future?
I mean, if you're an organization that's surpassed, I would even call it like 300K, 400K in
Mm-hmm.
revenue, you should have, I would say, two full-time people at least that are
Mm-hmm.
helping push your
Mm-hmm.
mission forward. I think it depends on how the revenue models are shaped, but you can still do a lot of work with contractors and part-time
Mm-hmm.
help at that early stage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, when I started my business 7 years ago, I was bringing in contractors from the get-go just because I
Mm-hmm.
understood the value of me being able to really focus on the things that I was good at and building the business versus the doing of everything. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I remember I'm a big fan of Marie Forleo, and I remember like years ago when I was listening to her stuff more frequently, she would say, you're going to find yourself like doing great, but then you're not going to be able to grow. You're in this bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And to get to the
Mm-hmm.
next step, you're going to reach this uncomfortable phase.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, you probably know this too. It's
I
like
know that.
you got to do some scary things every
Mm-hmm.
time you like break out of that bubble. And so I would say if
Mm-hmm.
it feels a little scary, it's probably a good feeling to get to that
Mm-hmm.
next level, or else you're just going to stay in this place. And if you want to stay in that spot that you're in, that's totally fine too. Just depends upon what you're looking to do. I think something else. I'm about to have a conversation with a friend of mine, Blythe. She ran the organization Dressember for years,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
they're a human trafficking organization. And she realized for herself when operations, financial was getting hard. And
Mm-hmm.
they decided, she thought the best next step to keep the mission alive of what they do was to merge with
Mm-hmm.
IJM, International Justice Mission. And I was like, what an amazing thing to be able to step away from the ego as a founder of somebody who's led an
Mm-hmm.
organization for a decade. And for the betterment of the mission, merge with an organization that can take it to the next level.
Right.
So I don't know that, I mean, this is totally separate from marketing, but I also loved how she communicated that to me. I'm a monthly donor of Dressember.
Mm-hmm.
And then now that we'll
Mm-hmm.
be going towards IJM. Um, but I don't know. I think finding where you make a list. What do you love doing? What do you not love doing? But what do you know needs to get
Mm-hmm.
done? And then find the right people.
I love that you mentioned contractors, because I want to go back to like what needs to be true for nonprofits, like on the staffing side of things. I think that oftentimes, and I'm sure there's people listening that fall into this camp, kind of development individuals, right? Director of development, whatever the title might be, and they're charged with fundraising and perhaps online campaigns certainly is an extension of fundraising, but the skill sets required to understand the technology to capture the leads, the creation of content that is compelling
Mm-hmm.
and interesting for those individuals, the copy that will convert. All of the things are unique skill sets. And so this is me just being an advocate for the development folks out there that are being tasked with this responsibility, knowing that that's not your true strength. And I think for me, what I've seen really effective in my own business, as well as other businesses, that perhaps the role of this person needs to change, less of doing all of the things and expected to excel in all of the areas of the creative side. And I'm talking visual, I'm talking copy, the technology and all of that, and be more of a quarterback for or the logistics manager for all of these, contractors. And I agree with you. We use contractors for everything on the marketing space because the skills are becoming so specialized and diversified. And it's just not realistic to expect a development person to be your volunteer coordinator and your
Yeah.
marketing specialist in all the different areas. And
Something
by the
that could
way,
help is
yeah.
AI. Now too, I use
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT for a lot of things. I mean, you have to, one suggestion that I have that's been very helpful is you have to tell ChatGPT what you want it to be before you ask
Mm-hmm.
it for said thing. So I always
Yeah.
say, hello, I talk to it like a person. Hello, you are an expert copywriter specializing in the nonprofit industry on
Yeah.
these different things. And we are working on together website copy. Like I would give it, it's like, you are
Yeah.
blank. And then I ask
Mm-hmm.
it, great. Now can you help me come up with X, Y, and Z? So that is
Exactly.
a free way to get around some of the hirings if you're at the very beginning stage.
Yes. Requires a great deal of resourcefulness, that's for sure. Let's talk more about these monthly giving campaigns and kind of programs, if you will. I know this is a lot of the work that you're doing right now. I wholeheartedly believe recurring revenue is the way to go. That's how my business has been set up. That's how I recommend a lot of businesses. And let's be honest, that's how a lot of businesses, I think, are shifting um, their models anyway, not just in the
Yeah.
nonprofit world, but the for profit world. But this topic is certainly not new. We haven't talked a lot about it on this podcast. Every director of development out there that I know and that I've talked to in the last few years talks about a monthly giving
Mm-hmm.
program. Break it down to us. How do you get started in a practical way? I mean, I know you certainly use campaigns, but are there steps in between that people need to be thinking about if they're trying to really finally get this thing launched and get some momentum going?
Yes, I would say the first thing, the easiest one to do is to make sure that you have on your donation form recurring giving as an option. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of times now they have one time and monthly. So just go ahead and make sure both of those are on. But I
Mm-hmm.
really recommend, I believe in having a specific monthly giving product, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So having a landing page that you can direct people to that tells specifically the story of why monthly giving matters to your
Mm-hmm.
organization. It's a monthly only donation form, so there's no confusion. Um, there's some sort of name. I love having names to the program because I think the difference between giving once and giving monthly is there's a community feel. So
Mm-hmm.
a great example of right now, I'm actually looking at my current group. Um, there's an organization, Politicist, and for their organization focuses on providing childcare for voters, people that are going to the polls. So their monthly giving program is called The Village. You know how it takes a village to
Yes.
raise a
Yeah.
family. So join the village, be a part of the village. Like, how can you make it you feel a part of something together? And then that way, that also creates so many different marketing elements for you. So I would say have a landing page, specifically focus the language and value proposition on recurring giving, have a donation form that is optimized for monthly giving only on that page, make it very easy for people to be able to donate in whatever way they want through different payment options. And then again, so important is to make sure you have a thank you retention process in place. I have dropped being a monthly donor to organizations that I haven't heard from in 12 months. Right. And then they asked me, will you re-up your gift? And I'm like, I have no emails from you. I received there's nothing in the mail. There's nothing that's told me what you're up to. So that's where I would start. Name, landing page, optimize your donation process.
That that that's all really great advice. And I think that what you're really talking about here is having some intentionality about it. Like, what is the program? How do we want to call, what do we want to call it? To your point, how do we keep them engaged? What kind of expectations are we putting on ourselves to share information or engage with these donors on an ongoing basis?
And you have to let people know that it exists. That's the biggest thing for growth. You have to talk about it. You can't be the biggest miss I hear is people say, I'm afraid to ask for the monthly gift because then will they not give that one-time big donation? Will they not come to this event? And that is absolutely not true. The monthly donors are the ones that are giving more than just monthly. They're giving one time. They're wanting to volunteer. They're wanting to attend an event. Like, they are your super fans. So we have to let that scarcity that gets talked about all the time in the sector, let that go. These people are in it with you.
You bring up a good point, because so many times I'll see, a give monthly option. And I think a lot of people probably assume, if I want to give a big gift, this is just a way for me to spread it out over time. But for me, the financial person, I understand the ebbs and flows of fundraising. And I think it's a great pitch to say, especially some of these organizations that have a little bit more of a feast and famine kind of cycle of funding, right? Help smooth out our operational needs, and step in when funds tend to be lower.
Yes.
And having those conversations with donors to really see that there is a purpose for this, it matters. Can they support you in a more intentional way? I think there's a lot more conversation and messaging that could go into why this is important. In addition
having
to,
the
I'm sure, a lot of other
revenue
marketing purposes. Absolutely,
amazing.
yes, absolutely. So, Dana, before we wrap up, I know that you do a lot of work on monthly giving. As I mentioned, a lot of nonprofits I know are out there talking about wanting to start, or maybe they have one, maybe they have a couple of the steps that you have, but it hasn't been picking up the steam. I know there's a lot of work you're doing, and you kind of briefly shared, or if you could share again for us, I know you're going to be rolling out another mastermind this fall or late summer on this monthly giving program. And if organizations are interested in taking it to the next level, help them understand what the next step is. What can they do? How could you help them?
Yeah, two really big things. So I have the mastermind. I'm working on also if you have an existing program and you don't need one from scratch, I'm working on something where essentially we'll be like your monthly giving sustainer team. So we'll help create the social content. We'll do copywriting strategies with you. We'll think about ways to market the program. So that will be coming. And then I have the first ever, I'm launching the monthly giving summit, September 5th and 6th, which I'm very excited about. It's going to be 2 half days, and it's going to be all things dedicated towards building those subscriptions for good. So panel discussions, corporate partners coming in to talk. There's going to be one-on-one networking for you with other nonprofits, really getting rid of the smoke and mirrors and allowing you to talk to other organizations that might be in a similar place as you, and having small breakout rooms. So that's a great place to start. That's going to be coming up September 5th and 6th. Yes, the mastermind will launch in July. And what else? I think those are the two main ways.
The summit, is that in person or virtual?
Virtual.
Oh, great. Even better.
Yeah.
Perfect. And the best way for people to find more information on these events or the work that you're doing, where's the best place they can go for that?
Yep. So monthlyGivingSummit.com. You can
Okay.
RSVP for that. By the time that this is launching, the registration will be open. There's an interest page as we
Okay.
speak right now. And then just go to positiveequation.com, my business, and you'll find, just click monthly giving at the top, and that'll have information on the next enrollment period for the mastermind.
Sounds like amazing resources for so many organizations, like I said, out there that I know this has been a priority for them, or at least on their development strategy list of things that they want to get
Yes.
launched. So this is so good. Thank you, Dana, so much for your words of wisdom and your resources and, tips for some of the free apps out there that can help us start better messaging and starting to build this kind of infrastructure that we need to really modernize our marketing efforts. So thank you again, and go to Dana's website to check out your work and the summits and all of the things. Dana, thank you again for joining us. This has been so informative.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, well, you all, my shameless pitch, it's time for that. If you can go ahead and wherever you're listening or watching to this content, engage with it in some way. Like I say every time, the more you engage, the more this information is made available or easily accessible or searchable for other leaders of nonprofits suffering with some of the same issues you are. So please go ahead and like, subscribe, share, whatever it is you're going to do. We appreciate you so much. Until next time, bye everyone.
That's all we have for you today. Once again, I'm Tosha Anderson with the Charity CFO, and this is A Modern Nonprofit Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to A Modern Nonprofit Podcast on all major streaming platforms so you will stay notified for when the latest episode drops, which will help you stay in the know about anything nonprofit related. Also, join our community on Facebook by searching for A Modern Nonprofit Podcast and follow us on all of our social media accounts. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.